to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil Kapadia here with Steven Ruiz and Diante Lee. Championship weekend. The last time this season we will be previewing multiple games. We'll have a Super Bowl preview, but last time we got two games. We got Commanders at Eagles. We got Bills at Chiefs. We will go over those games, answer 5 questions about each of them. We will dig into our season-long contest, our props picks contest, which, believe it or not, everyone is still alive. No one has been eliminated with 2 weeks left. And then we will hit on the latest coaching news. Diante, how you feeling? Are you getting sad? 3 more football games to watch this season, or are you feeling happy?
Listen, the good thing about being a coach and working in sports media is that like my year is very tiered. So as the high school season is ending is right when the NFL season is getting its most interesting. So I would say that like I'm probably the proper amount of emotionally invested in the results right now. But I will say once we cross that threshold and the clocks hit 0 at the end of the Super Bowl, I am probably going to get some amazing sleep in the weeks to come after.
Look at that smile on his face. This man cannot wait for these 3 games to be played. That man is thinking about it.
Ruiz, over under for you watching Shedeur Sanders film February 19th. What do you got? That was a good over-under off the top of my head, wasn't it?
It is.
So that's about a week or so ahead of the combine.
Take the over. Okay.
I'm sorry. This quarterback class, this is the one that I've been dreading the most. I mean, the what was it, 2022 when we only got Kenny Pickett in the first round? That was a bad one, but there were some interesting prospects there. But this one, I think there's like, I don't know. I think it's going to get toxic. It's going to get weird, especially
you're not looking forward to it. Yeah, it's not like last year.
I don't think it's going to be about football, is what I'll say.
Oh, you know what? I didn't even think about that. The introduction of Shedeur Sanders and the Sanders content mill into NFL media. Oh my God. I really hadn't even thought about that. It's going to get thorny.
I don't know. When I start ranking him, there's going to be some issues. If I rank him too low, if I rank him too high, he's going to be one of those guys where no matter where I rank him, it's going to cause problems.
There's your off-season preview at theringer.com and the Ringer NFL show. But we have time for that. We've got 4 teams battling to get to the Super Bowl and to win the Super Bowl. We are going to start in Philadelphia, 3 p.m. Eastern, Sunday afternoon. Commanders at Eagles. We've got 5 questions for each of these games, and then we can take these questions wherever we want to take them to preview the actual matchup. But the first question here is, which quarterback would you rather have in this game? So Jayden Daniels, phenomenal rookie season. Jalen Hurts has not had a great season and is coming into this game with a knee injury, although he was on the practice field as we record this on Thursday. Diante, let's start with you. You look at these 2 quarterbacks. Who do you have more trust in when it comes to this matchup?
Honestly, I mean, there's a sizable gap. Even if we were just ranking this 1 through 4 for the 4 teams that are in the conference championship, I feel like it's 1 and 2 is a conversation, a gap between those 2 and 3, and then a sizable gap between Jayden Daniels and Jalen Hurts. I think that Daniels is a clear answer here. And this is something I was writing about coming into this week, not just about Jayden Daniels and trying to contextualize his accomplishments as a rookie coming into conference championship weekends, but just some of the ways that he has layered different answers onto his game as far as processing, as far as his answer for the blitz, how he uses the threat of his legs. I think that for me watching the film coming into this game, Jayden Daniels is clearly playing better. I would say he's being a better decision maker. You know, obviously a lot of people around the Eagles will probably point to the lack of turnovers over the whole of the season for Jalen Hurts, especially in the second half of the year, and say like, hey, he's playing safe with the ball. He's not making many mistakes. But I think if you're judging sacks plus turnovers plus explosive potential on a down-to-down basis, Jayden Daniels clearly has him by a few strides in that regard. I mean, I think that the way he's been playing over the last couple of weeks actually makes this an interesting matchup between he and Vic Fangio on the defensive side of the ball.
I totally agree with that. Like, I think there's a wide gap between the two, and I don't think there's a wide gap between like their standing in the league necessarily. I just think that there's so much overlap in their skill sets, and like every weakness you can point out with Jayden Daniels, I think is a bigger concern for Jalen Hurts. And I think it's the other way around too. Like every strength for Jalen Hurts, I think is a strength of Jayden Daniels, including the turnover thing. Like yeah, Jalen Hurts isn't turning over the football, but we've talked about this. He's not really pushing the ball downfield. He's not making plays that leave him open to turnovers. Whereas I think Jaden Daniels has been a little bit more aggressive, and he's also not turning over the football.
Right.
It's not coming at the cost necessarily of other things within the offense. My comp for Jaden Daniels before the season was a juiced up Jalen Hurts. I think he's Jalen Hurts with more juice. I think he has better timing too. That's something that I didn't necessarily anticipate. I think that's hard to anticipate when you're going from the college game to the pro game. But it's been clear that he gets rid of the ball quickly. And one of his strengths, it's not like something that's like you're going to write about or get excited about, is knowing when to check down. Like a lot of rookies don't know when to throw the check down. And like you go back to that first Eagles games, and there's a lot of time when the Eagles are in zone coverage and they're dropping under the route combinations. It's like 3rd and 7, and Jaden takes an underneath route. The guy breaks the tackle and you get a first down instead of taking a sack or throwing it into coverage. And I think that's been one of the more impressive things about him. Like questions about I think even their questions about their ceiling are kind of similar, because I don't think either of them has a spectacular arm. Like Jaden Daniels has a good arm, but he doesn't have like a Josh Allen, even Drake May, Caleb Williams type of arm. But you could say the same thing about Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts doesn't pose as much of a threat as a passer outside of the pocket, as a runner outside of the pocket, and that explosive potential that Diante referred to, I think is really the difference between the two. That changes the ceiling for Jaden Daniels, where I think their floors are kind of similar, where Jaden's is kind of maybe a little bit higher.
Yeah, I was trying to I thought we would go down this path. And so I was trying to come up with, all right, well, where are the areas where Jalen Hurts is better than Jaden Daniels right now? It's really hard. Short yardage is the brotherly shove is the only thing that's honestly the only thing that I could come up with that I was really strong about. I think the point about the turnovers, Jaden Daniels, maybe his best combo of stats is he has the 3rd lowest turnover worthy play percentage in the NFL, and he has the 2nd highest EPA on deep throws. So he's, the high leverage plays that it's not success rate, it's not down to down efficiency. Those high leverage plays, he's really come through in a big way. He's got the highest EPA on scrambles, and it's not even close. He's first, Mahomes is 2. The difference between Daniels and Mahomes is the same as the difference between Mahomes and Geno Smith, who's 15th in the NFL. So he makes more plays with his legs. He's pushed the ball downfield more. He's not turning it over at the same rate. He has the 5th best offense in the NFL per DVOA. Jalen Hurts is 13th. Jalen Hurts has a better offensive line, better wide receivers, better running back. It's impossible, honestly. I'm sure some people might be listening to this saying, who are Jalen Hurts fans and think we're being too hard. I really think it's hard to make the case right now that Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback in most areas than Jaden Daniels.
And I'm not someone who's quick to give a rookie quarterback who hasn't really proven that he can do it again or do it in different offense, different situations, that much credit. But I don't even think it's a question. I think like you said, it's hard to make the argument with stats, but when you watch on film, it makes it even harder to make the argument.
Yeah.
Jaden is everything that I think Eagles fans want Jalen Hurts to be. If Jalen Hurts was this, have the same mindset, how he approached the game, getting rid of the ball quickly, being a scrambler decisively, and he still had the type of, he's never had Jaden Daniels' speed, but I think we can all agree that Jalen Hurts has slowed down as a runner over the last couple of years. And you can chalk that up to a number of factors, whether it's been injuries or him just putting on more weight to protect himself in the NFL. That just tends to happen. I think there's going to be a certain point where Jaden Daniels does that and loses a little bit of his speed. But he's the scrambler that you kind of hope Jalen Hurts would be. He throws the vertical deep ball. Even that, that's the thing that's always been Jalen Hurts' thing, is he throws a great deep ball, especially to the outside of vertical routes. But Jaden Daniels won a Heisman doing that, and it just translated to the pros immediately.
Yeah. Also using the middle of the I think there was a big question about Jaden Daniels. Would he use the middle of the field this season? I think he's targeted the middle of the field at a top 5 rate or something this season. When you just look at how their offense is constructed, I think he's been better in terms of avoiding. He's only taken 1 sack in these 2 playoff games. That is if you would have told me that before the season, even as someone who liked Jaden Daniels, I would be like, no, that's 2 playoff games. He's not going to be able to do that. So, your reminder is a good one that this is 1 season. And I'm trying to remind myself, and I still like CJ Stroud, but rookie seasons don't always tell us the full truth. Sometimes you look back 3 years later and you go, okay, it didn't take the trajectory that maybe we were expecting, but we're going off this year, this game. I think everyone says it's a pretty easy answer here.
Yeah. Kind of concerning when you're paying one of the guys $250 million.
Yeah.
And you've poured so many resources into a passing game that you hardly use.
I mean, the Commanders, if the Commanders win this game, we know 100% we'll be talking about Jaden Daniels at the end of this. Jalen Hurts could play poorly in this game, and we could say the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl. So that kind of tells you the difference between the two guys and what's being asked of them as well. All right, question number 2 in this game. Which unit matters the most? Ruiz, let's start with you. This was an interesting one. Which way to kind of go with for this? Which unit matters the most in this game?
I was going to say Washington's defensive front, but I was worried that's too broad. So I'll just go with the linebackers. I think it's either the defensive line or the linebackers, but I think this game is going to be, like it always is for the Eagles, it's going to be about the run game and their ability to get blockers to the second level. I think when Philadelphia gets blockers to the second level, when they're working their little combo blocks and climbing I think that's when they're the best in the league. And I think that's what Jeff Stoutland loves to do. That's why he loves inside zone so much. And I think we're going to see a fair amount of it in this game. If those combo blocks are getting to the second level and kind of making Wagner and Luvu declare in a gap, that's when you see the home run plays, especially if you're getting a lot of single high, which you can always expect from a Dan Quinn defense. When you look at the splits in the Eagles run game this year, it's kind of like a passing game. Like when they go up against the two high shell, shorter runs, but a higher success rate and more EPA, actually more efficiency. But when they go up against a single high, explosive run rate goes way up. And that's when you see all the home runs from Saquon Barkley. But there are more of those like 0 and 1 and 2 yard gains, those unsuccessful runs. I'm assuming that Washington is going to take that approach, try to load the box, try to make Jalen Hurts beat them as a runner. And it's going to come down to those linebackers. And I'm kind of worried about it. I know Bobby Wagner still gets celebrated as one of the better linebackers in the league, but he doesn't move like he used to. And when you watch him on tape, like those tackle numbers that he racks up aren't nearly as impressive as they are when you're just looking at a box score.
Diante, what do you think? Is that did you have the Commanders? I think that's a good one. Obviously, I mean, can they? This question about stopping the Eagles' run game? You know, if you can play too high, like you mentioned, and that gives you more guys to once if Saquon Barkley does break through the line of scrimmage, then can you at least not make it a 50-yard run? It's so funny. I've never heard a running back talked about like this, where it's like, you can load the box, but there's danger in loading the box. Because if you load the box and he breaks through, I mean, there was the run last week, him versus safety, like 8 yards away, and just no chance. No one in the world would have watched that and been like,
if you're a free safety, would you rather be that guy? I think it was Cam Kitchens. Would you rather be him, like staring down Saquon Barkley in the open field, or would you rather it be Justin Jefferson? I'm kind of taking Saquon or Justin Jefferson. I'd rather just deal with that and hope Sam Darnold misses the throw. Because I'm getting embarrassed.
There's no chance. No matter what. Yeah, you don't have an angle. So
I would just fall down immediately. Just fall down and don't get embarrassed. It almost looked
like that's what he did. I mean, I don't know.
Just about to say, not far. Not far off.
What do you think, Diante?
I would say that wasn't my pick, but it was on my list of things to consider, right? And I think that it's interesting for this game because we have a kind of incomplete sample size. At least if we're judging off of what the second game, the Week 16 game was, after Jalen Hurts was out, and it was pretty clear that Philadelphia's game plan did not have any consideration of a quarterback not being a running threat. And clearly Kenny Pickett, who was dealing with, I think, a ribs injury at the time, couldn't run, didn't want to take contact. They didn't have the ability to use a quarterback run game. So you saw a lot of pistol under center runs where Washington was running slants. They were spiking guys into gaps. They were bringing guys off the edge. Those are the kinds of things, for all of Jalen Hurts' problems, those are the kinds of things, at least when he's on the field, in theory, it's not as big of a concern because you do have the designed quarterback run game. You do have those RPOs where he can get the ball out quickly, and they have built a lot of successful stuff around him to just have easy answers. And I think that speaks to what Steven was bringing up in terms of being efficient, even when defenses are throwing maybe some unconventional looks or if they're just playing back, playing more 2 deep looks to take away the RPO game. They have a lot of answers for that. I think for me, my answer was more so Washington's interior offensive line. So similar thinking, just on the other side of the ball. I think that it's a huge key for the Commanders if they want to have a chance of not needing to be almost perfect on 3rd and 4th downs in this game, or trying to avoid those 3rd and obvious situations. They cannot allow Jalen Carter to be the player that he was at his best last week against the Rams. If they're losing and they don't have Sam Cosmi, so now this is like highly, neon red alert for this interior offensive line. All of their resources have to be poured into making sure there are two sets of eyes on him at every point. You've got to give him Aaron Donald treatment, basically, if you don't want him to wreck this game for you, not only as far as a drop back passing game for Jaden Daniels, but the run game, right? The spread run game is a non-factor if they can't block along the defensive interior, right? That takes so many things off the menu for them. And I think that if they don't win those matchups on the interior, now you are giving Vic Fangio the benefit of being able to spend more time in split safety looks. You're able to run more exotic things on the edges where you can drop a Nolan Smith, you can drop a Josh Sweat into coverage and run a simulated pressure where you're bringing a guy on the interior or off the opposite edge. And you don't want Jaden Daniels to have to be in the pocket wondering who's coming, who's dropping, what are the angles, what's the coverage shell. I don't know who's going to be in what spot, the way he was in the Thursday night game in week 11, because that was a big reason why he was holding the ball a little bit longer. You didn't see as aggressive an approach in terms of pushing the ball down the field. When they're able to take those chances downfield, now that opens up so much of the field for Jaden Daniels as a scrambler, because now defenses have to be a little bit more disparate in approaches. Are you going to pressure the quarterback, or are you going to try to cloud coverage over Terry McLaurin, or just play more too deep in general? I think that for the sake of controlling this game, they have got to win on the interior. And I think that right now, this is probably as bad a situation as you can be in, not having your best interior offensive lineman as you're seeing the best interior defensive lineman you'll see on your schedule, save for maybe Chris Jones if they were to see them next week in the Super Bowl.
I love, like, when a playoff game, when you have a regular season game before that, and then in this case we have two, but I feel like that week 11 game is kind of just tough to parse and kind of apply to this game, not only because of the Hurts injury, just because of how the game went. Like, Washington scores 22 points in that game, and you kind of remember it differently than how it actually played out, especially with Jaden Daniels, who was the hero late, but also had some shaky moments throughout the first three quarters of that game. He really turned it on in the fourth quarter. So, and then there's the other element where they slowed down Saquon Barkley after the Jalen Hurts injury. But I also think that almost works against Washington. Obviously, it helped them win that game, but it gives Philadelphia some sense of how they're going to adjust. I know it was Kenny Pickett, but we did see some adjustments to the run game. And I just think this coaching staff, especially like Jeff Stoutland, the run game coordinator, that's one of the things he's good at. He's good at game planning up a run plan. And what worked for Washington in the second half might not necessarily work, even if it has nothing to do with Jalen Hurts being on the field this time.
And they have a bunch of good tape that Detroit just gave them in terms of popping explosive runs, right? That's the other thing, is like, it's kind of lost in the flow of the game because of all the turnovers. But Jahmyr Gibbs had whatever he wanted as a runner in that game. And Detroit's offensive line looked like they were 2.5 weight classes ahead of Washington's defensive interior. So I think that there's going to be a lot to borrow from that game. And to Steven's point, I think what you hope is that they're not lured into like this false sense of confidence that, if we just sell out to, go single high, run blitzes, send Frankie Louisville off the edge, get into these bear type fronts, that we can do what we did in the second quarter, in the fourth quarter of week 16 when Philadelphia was trying to put the game away and they were really able to stop the run. I think that that's a big danger point. Just them in the trenches in general on both sides of the ball. That's been an issue for them all year. They've done a great job working around it, both scheme wise and having enough players with interesting skill sets and unique skill sets, I should say, to be able to get them out of trouble when they do run up against these mismatches. But it's entirely possible that we're coming back after these games saying, hey, man, they just double teamed people with Cam Jurgens and Mekhi Becton, and there was just not an answer for that every time they went duo and inside zone. That's a possibility. And on the other end, they might not be able to block Milton Williams and Jalen Carter, and that could be what breaks the game in Philadelphia's direction.
Yeah, I'm just piggybacking on your guys' point here. I had the Eagles' offensive line, and I think for a few reasons. One is this is the star of the team. I mean, you can surround them with whatever. They just make life so much easier for everyone else. Like I watch other teams, and when their like guard gets beat cleanly in pass pro, I'm like, oh, that's it. It happens to Mekhi Becton sometimes, but you don't see it a lot on Eagles film. Now there's two X factors here with that though. I think Cam Jurgens, the center who replaced Jason Kelce, who's played really well this season, back injury. Did not practice Wednesday. We'll see. We're recording this just as the practice report might come out on Thursday. So that's something to keep an eye on. That do they have to shuffle that offensive line a little bit? Does it look a little different? And then to your guys' point, I think that week 16 game is interesting because Kenny Pickett came in the game and they couldn't really run the ball that well. Jalen Hurts injured his knee last week, end of the third quarter. Rest of the game, he did not have a single run in that game, whether it was designed, whether it was a scramble. They moved the pocket, but in terms of him being a part of the run game, which I still think is a huge deal. I mean, for all the criticisms that are valid about the passing game, I mean, he had a 42-yard touchdown run last week where he broke a defensive tackle attempt 5 yards downfield, where a lot of quarterbacks aren't going to be able to do that. So that's interesting to me. Do the Eagles go into this game being like, we don't think Jalen Hurts is going to be a big part of the run game? Well, how do you scheme around that? Are you using under center runs? Are you using more RPOs?
Yeah.
What are you doing schematically to give that run game a chance? Because we've seen when it looks good, they control the game, they break off explosives. When it does, if it doesn't, now you're talking about a game that could get a little frisky in the fourth quarter.
I think it has to be an RPO game for that reason, and that's going to lead me into my first pick for this episode. I'm going to go Jalen Hurts over 179 passing yards. I think we're going to see more early down passes from him, and I think if he just is able to hit on a few explosives, which I think is totally possible against this Washington defense, they're going to give you those chances. Then I think you could have a big day for him, which is like, it's kind of crazy that we're talking about a $50 million quarterback in these terms, but like, I could see him getting up to 200 yards and having a big day. That's insane to say. But
see, I like what you did. I was actually looking at this for multiple receivers. I decided to take an AJ Brown anytime touchdown as one of my picks. And I think that not just the RPOs, but Steven kind of hinted at it as well. The explosive passes that I think are going to be available. If you're Washington, there can only be one answer defensively, which is that you're going to have to kill me with somebody other than Saquon Barkley. Mm-hmm. If we're going to go down, it's going to be for a reason other than, we allow too much space on the interior. I think with that, you're going to see a bunch of blitzes. You're going to see them really have guys close to the line of scrimmage. And to me, it doesn't have to be the fade over the top, like the one that AJ Brown dropped. That was one of the few well-thrown balls that Jalen Hurts had in that game last week. I think that it can be a slant because you're getting cover one, right? Off an RPO. And that was just him and Marshawn Lattimore. I think that, not that there are many good answers in terms of guys to cover an AJ Brown, but knowing that these defensive backs want to be more pressed, they like to be more handsy. To me, I think that those are the kinds of matchups that AJ Brown thrives against most because you can't bully the bully. He's the guy who's shoving guys off of him. He's usually pretty good at separating late, even if you are playing physically, because he is such a big body. And we know that he's elusive. He can make guys miss in spite of his size. He has that top gear speed. I would not be surprised to see they go back to, some of the classics where you get him on a 5-yard in route, you get him on a slant route, you get him on a hitch in an RPO as an isolated receiver. And now it's a glorified punt return for a guy like that, right? And I think that in that situation, you can probably get a big play, even if it comes more for yards after catch. From purely a matchup perspective, if I'm not taking how terrible I feel every time Jalen Hurts drops back to pass, if I am just looking at the matchup between body types and skill level and the play calling, everything here tells me they are going to be able to get explosive runs just because that offensive line is so much better than Washington's defensive lines. And they should be able to get one or two explosive passes because they don't have enough guys to guard them one-on-one once they do load up the box to handle that offensive line. The only way I can see this not happening is if Jalen Hurts is more hurt than Philadelphia is let on and he's totally limited and they're not able to access all of the playbook, or they have a turnover, they have turnover issues because Jalen Hurts can't move in the pocket. And now he has to force the ball into windows that he wasn't, earlier in the season because he doesn't have enough time to evade or scramble quickly. Everything else to me is just pointing at Philadelphia having most of what they want when they have the ball.
Injury report actually just came out as we're discussing this topic. Cam Jurgens, Eagles center, does not practice for a second straight day with a back injury. Also, Dallas Goedert, the tight end, who has been very good for them in the playoffs, has not practiced with an ankle injury these 2 days. And actually, if you look at that,
that's a concern.
If you look at their run game issues against the Commanders, Dallas Goedert was not in there. And their tight ends got manhandled.
Was getting his ass kicked.
Manhandled in that game. So potentially a little sneaky injuries there on the Eagles side. On the Commander side, Bobby Wagner. I hear what you were saying, Ruiz. I will say against the run, though, in that last Eagles game, he was giving them issues. It was kind of an old school Bobby Wagner's wrecking stuff. So he has not practiced with an ankle injury. And then Daron Payne, their defensive tackle, has not practiced either with a knee and finger injury this week. So that just came out. It's always exciting. It's not like breaking news like so-and-so just got traded or something like that. But, when you're doing the championship game previews and the injury report comes out as you're discussing, Adds a little juice.
It does. You got to drop it on the pod. But I feel like those are some significant injuries too that dropped. Like each one of them, not just because they're like massive players, just because how they're going to affect these matchups that we've been talking about the whole time.
Yeah, it was good timing. Exactly sort of what we were just talking about. Those guys relate to that matchup, specifically the Eagles' run game against the Commanders' run defense. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back. We will get to the other 3 questions from this matchup and then move over to the AFC. All right, we are back on the Ringer NFL show. So these guys gave out their first picks. Let's do a little update on the picks contest. We'll give out these picks throughout the show and recap them at the end. Last week, I picked up some ground, 3-0. Ruiz and Diante go 1-2. Season record, Ruiz still in first place, 36-24. I am 3 games behind. So if I lose a game on Ruiz this week, he clinches it. He clinches this bad boy. So I'm 3 games back at 33-27. Diante at 500. He had 500 record on the line, Diante. Gotta go 3-3 or 4-2 to not have the losing record in the last 2 weeks. And you're still in it, by the way. 30-30. You need to make up.
I'm like Bengals in it.
Hey,
Bengals at the end of the season.
It almost happened. If Ruiz goes 0-3 the next 2 weeks and you go 3-0, crazier things have happened.
Very possible. I feel like I'm charging right now. Like I'm slowly but surely just giving the lead away.
As a group, 99-81. I will take that. I would have signed up for that at the beginning of the season. So let's finish strong with our picks contest here. So you just heard it. Ruiz has the over on Jalen Hurts passing yards. Diante has AJ Brown anytime touchdown. I guess I'll go with my one here that applies. Saquon Barkley longest rush over 23.5 yards. So it just feels like he breaks one of those every game. So I don't need it. It doesn't need to be a high success rate game, Saquon. We just need the one long run over 23.5 yards, longest rush for Saquon Barkley. All right. Question 3. Whose legacy from this game is most at stake? Diante, we start with you. What do you got?
This one actually hung me up a little bit more than I thought. Like the answer that I was going to go with initially was Dan Quinn, just from like a reputational standpoint, knowing that you were able to, how it ended in Dallas and then obviously what happened the last time he made a deep playoff run in Atlanta. I think it would go a long way to have a team be this far ahead of expectations in year one. But to me, this comes back to the first conversation that I think we had on the show about the Eagles once I was hired. And that's that everything with this season is going to be a referendum on Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. And I can't really, it's inextricable for me talking about those 2 guys. If they come out and lose, the conversation in Philadelphia, fair or not, is going to be, you didn't have to see Detroit. You didn't have to see Minnesota. You saw Green Bay while everybody was hurt, and you had your home field divisional game against the Rams in a game that people expected you to win. If you're not able to deliver and get to the Super Bowl here with the super friends around your quarterback, then where does that leave us right now as far as your head coach quarterback pairing? I think that for both of them, and I think that this works positively for them as well. I think if you see any kind of big time passing performance from Jalen Hurts, and the same thing happened in 2022 when he was playing well in the playoffs, or when he had his bigger games towards the back end of the season, I think that there's less questions about whether or not it's viable. I don't know if that's appropriate because you have to look at the entire body of work when you're judging them. I just think that for the sake of both of these guys, those 2 need this win more than Washington, even though we know it is it's incorrect to think that like, oh, you know, you're ahead of schedule in the NFL in year one. You can always get back. We just saw with Detroit that that's not always the case. And they had a much more loaded roster than Washington does. I still think that there's enough goodwill built up between Quinn, Jaden Daniels, and Cliff Kingsbury, if he ultimately stays for another year, that people will be okay, even if they don't get over the hump here. I think that for Jalen and Sirianni, this is like crazy to say in a conference championship game, but it's absolutely a must win for them, in my opinion.
Ruiz, what do you got?
Yeah, Jalen Hurts' thing is like he's the winner. So if he stops winning and that goes away and you don't have the stats, then I agree with you. But I think Sirianni he has more at stake in this game, and it's more of a positive thing. Because if you make 2 Super Bowls, like I've looked at the list of coaches who have made 2 Super Bowls, and it's an impressive list. And guess what? There's no more hot seat talk anymore. Doesn't matter like what happened before, what happened after. I know Coughlin won both of his Super Bowls, but Coughlin, hot seat talk never came back up in New York after that. He got to retire whenever he wanted. Mike Tomlin, I guess there is some like unhinged hot seat talk, but he's never really in danger of losing his job. And these are guys that where I feel like the fan base has kind of grown tired, or like they are ready for a new coach in Pittsburgh just because they haven't won it a lot. I think if Sirianni makes 2 Super Bowls, it's going to be hard to fire him. And the same is true for Jalen, but that's true either way, just because of the contract. I really, if he has a bad game in these playoffs and they get eliminated, what are they going to do? They're going to cut him? No, he's going to be the quarterback next year. I think if Sirianni has a bad run, I don't think he's going to lose his job based on this playoff run. But if he loses this game, misses an opportunity, and then goes into next year and maybe starts slow, I think that hot seat talk starts up right away.
You ready for the top 5 winning percentages coaches in NFL history? 1, Guy Chamberlain. 2, John Madden. 3, Vince Lombardi. 4, George Allen. 5, Nicholas Sirianni. 706 winning percentage with potentially 2 Super Bowl appearances in his first 4 seasons. What a Pro Football Reference page.
Is this proof that head coaching doesn't matter, or is it proof that we have no idea what actually makes a good head coach? Because like Sirianni doesn't check any of the boxes seemingly, but he checks the one major box, and that's he wins football games. And hey, I know they have a good team and a good roster, but a lot of people have had good teams and good roster. They didn't win 70% of their games.
That's fair. I would say, though, like to make a college football corollary, to me, the Eagles are kind of like LSU and Ohio State, which is like, if you just have your shit together, chances are you're going to play for a national title at some point. Because the infrastructure is so strong, I think that maybe having Howie Roseman means that your head coach doesn't matter as much. Because
is Ryan Day the better call?
Probably. Or Ed Orgeron, I would say he's probably somewhere between like a Ryan Day / Ed Orgeron if we were doing like college football.
Ed actually
cups.
won with his super team, though. Ed actually won. He actually finished the job with his super team.
That's fair. That's fair. But I would say, I don't know. It would be an interesting conversation, even if, let's say, they had blown the divisional round game to the Packers, because Nick Sirianni can say like, hey man, 2 14-win regular seasons, and a Super Bowl trip. That doesn't, I'm not saying that I'm the best coach in the NFL, but when you've had me here, we won games. Even last season, we made the playoffs knowing all the issues that we had. And then I made the changes that were asked of me in terms of bringing in better coordinators. Again, I don't know if that makes for a good head coach. I certainly don't think that Nick Sirianni is a good head coach. He does not fit the profile of a good head coach to me. But the resume points are getting stronger the longer you keep a guy around. And I don't know, maybe he falls ass backwards into being, a Super Bowl winning head coach. And that's a wild thing to think about when you consider what the conversations were at mini camp and going into training camp this year. But yeah, the resume is getting hard to fight, even though I don't think that he's in that conversation in the top 5 to 8 head coaches in the NFL right now.
This is mostly a joke, but it's also not a joke. But like Big Dom, if they win the Super Bowl, Big Dom's
he's got the headset already.
You can't tell the story of the 2024 Eagles without talking about Big Dom. And if they win the Super Bowl, you can't tell the history of the NFL without Big Dom. I mean, are we getting Canton talk after this? If they win the Super Bowl?
Last time they faced the Commanders, he had to tie it all together. He had to separate Nick Sirianni from Zach Ertz because they're going at it.
Oh, that's right.
After that game. Don't forget about that other revenge angle here, Sirianni and Ertz. I had a tough one with this. Yeah, I had Ertz on the list for sure. I had Saquon on the list. I mean, just the season he's having, you know who else I had on the list though? If we're saying legacy, most at stake, Joe Shane. I mean, if they're getting to the Super Bowl on Saquon Barkley's back, the Joe Shane clips are going to be plentiful on social media after
Media
this
night's
game.
going to be hell for Joe Shane.
He should leave the country. Poor guy, not watch. So yeah, and then of course I also had Jaden Daniels written down. I mean, we talked about him already, but obviously a rookie quarterback to get to the Super Bowl with the defense that's 23rd in DVOA, it would legitimately be a start to a career we've never before seen. So it doesn't mean if he loses, there's not really much at stake, but if they win, then it's like, holy cow, what a season
for him. Honestly, I don't even know if he has to win. I mean, obviously there's like the historical implications of being like the first rookie to start a Super Bowl.
Just never happened before.
As long as he doesn't like turn the football over, I think his legacy is kind of set, because like in the NFL with quarterbacks, the narrative is written at the beginning of your year at the beginning of your career, and we never really adjust it. Like I remember Russell Wilson being like the clutch winner guy And he like led the NFL in game ending interceptions for like a 5-year span. No one ever readjusted. Like Joe Burrow gets the benefit of the doubt of being a winner because he went on that run. Jaden Daniels doesn't turn the ball over. He's not the reason they lose. Like, even if things go bad for him next year, they go south, maybe he has a CJ Stroud year, I think he's just going to have cover for the next couple of years. And we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And quite frankly, he's earned it.
He's earned it. Yeah, I think he's earned it. No doubt about it. All right. Who wins this game? Do we have an upset brewing with the recent injuries here? Ruiz, who do you like? Eagles or Commanders? And give me a pick against the spread too. Spread stays. Let me refresh. Let me make sure those injuries didn't change the spread here, fan. Nope, have not changed the spread.
No.
6.5. Eagles are
the line.
Nope, 6.5 point favorites.
I'm going to take the Eagles in this one, and I'm also going to take the under in it. I'm going to go under 47.5. That's going to be my second pick.
That's one of your picks.
For the episode.
Okay.
I think the Eagles defense is going to do a better job of containing this offense for the entirety of the game. I just think it's the best, maybe the deepest, best defense in the NFL. And I think Washington, as good as they have been, as explosive they have been, I do think if you could figure out what they do best and take those strengths away, that and make them play left-handed, it will look a little bit differently. We've seen that sporadically throughout the season. I think the Eagles have the perfect defense, if they're healthy, to kind of exploit that. And Saquon Barkley, I think, Sheil, you're going to hit on your bet. I think he's going to pop one or two, and that's going to be enough in this one. In a lower scoring game than I think people are anticipating.
Do you like the cover or no? Or you think Commanders keep it close, 6.5?
I do like the cover. I think Washington's defensive line, like I said, that's the unit that decides whether it's a blowout or it's a competitive game. If it's a competitive game, like anyone could win, I think, like we said, Commanders have the quarterback advantage, and usually closer games go to the team with a better quarterback.
Diante, what do you got?
I'm with Steven. I think the Eagles cover the 6.5 point spread. And if I were picking a pick here, it would be the under 47.5 points. Like, I just look stylistically. Last week, to me, I think played out big time in Washington's favor because Detroit had to play high variance football with all the defensive injuries. Obviously, they're not intending to turn the ball over as often as they did, but you knew that they were going to try to get as many explosive plays to put points on the board as they could in that game. Stylistically, it couldn't possibly be more different for this week. Philadelphia wants to play the opposite of high variance football on a down and down basis. And this is also a team, again, assuming that Jalen Hurts' legs feel good enough for them to do it and it's not going to be a health risk to him. If he's able to be involved at all as a designed runner or on the sneaks, now you're dealing with another team that can use 3rd and 2, 4th and 2, 4th and 1 the same way you do to sit on the football. I think that that's a big danger for Washington when you have to be perfect on a possession by possession basis almost to be able to win a football game. I thought that's what it was in the Thursday night game because they weren't playing poorly. It was just every mistake that they made was magnified because you knew Philadelphia was going to take time off the clock. And then once they started popping those explosive runs, it made it really difficult for Washington to keep pace. I think in the second game, they got the gift of the defense having breakdowns that were pretty uncharacteristic. I think it was the worst by pass EPA that Vic Fangio's defense had all season long. Certainly his worst when he was blitzing that they've had all season long. Yeah. I think that Philadelphia comes into this game and says, we're going to sit in these zone shells. We're going to rush for as much as possible. We're going to run the ball on early downs as much as we can. We'll take a couple of shots offensively when we get in the range to do so. But other than that, we're going to force you to be perfect for your 6 possessions that you get in the football game on the other side. And that's just not the way that Washington wants to play.
I've got the Eagles winning, but I like the Commanders to come. I just am blindly taking Jaden Daniels as a dog right now with the run he's on. And then I watched this Eagles passing game and I'm like, and now I look at some of these injuries and I feel like it could be a little ugly where, the defense could be good, but he's just scrambling or creating or making plays. And maybe this one is a little bit closer than people expect. So I've got the Eagles winning the game, but the Commanders covering the 6.5. I've also got one more pick from this game. Terry McLaurin over 64.5 receiving yards. I've just taken it in both the first 2 weeks of the playoffs. I'm going to do it once again. That week 16 matchup, the Commanders were one of the few teams that's like, we don't care if they want to limit explosive plays. Let's take shots on the outside against Quinyon Mitchell and Slay. And they got Slay with one on the right side and then got Mitchell with one on the left side. And so I think there's a chance. And we saw with the screen last week with McLaurin that he can put up those yards in different ways. So I've got over 64.5 receiving yards as my second pick for our contest. All right, last question for this game, and then we'll move on to the AFC. Which team, this actually I thought was a hard one. Which team is most likely to get back to this game next year? Ruiz, who do you got?
I didn't think it was that hard just because of the thing Diante said earlier, where it's like Ohio State, LSU, like as long as you don't screw things up, like there's too much talent to fail here. And I think there's too much, they have so much room to fall down and still be a playoff team and still have a chance to not only win that division, but win 1 or 2 games in the playoffs. But Washington, it's kind of hard because it's tricky because you have this ascending quarterback. He could be, he could make that second year leap that a lot of the elite quarterbacks have made, or he could kind of have a CJ Stroud year where he's not worse, but like the things around him are worse and the stat line is worse and the results are worse. And then you have to look at the regression numbers where they're 10-2 in 1-score games. They won, 5 straight games on the last play of the game. Like if any of those results turn, they're not even in the playoffs, really.
Highest EPA on fourth downs.
Yeah, like a 90% conversion rate on fourth down, like a lot of short passes, a lot of bubble screens and stuff like that. Like an offense that isn't necessarily like has staying power. It's not an offense that we typically see around the NFL. So there are a lot of question marks, but if Jaden Daniels is the guy that everyone thinks he is and he takes a step next year, then I think both teams will be back.
Diante, who'd you pick?
I think the easier pick here, the one that just makes more sense when you're looking at talent, you're just looking at past performance, is Philadelphia. I think that what gets interesting is what happens if Kellen Moore gets poached by one of the few remaining head coaching vacancies, right? Like, let's say he lands in Jacksonville or something like that, and now you're hiring another offensive coordinator to try to work within the system. That now opens up a lot of questions of, are you going to be able to keep Nick Sirianni's hands off this thing again for the second consecutive year if you're bringing in a guy who maybe does not have the same kind of bona fides that Kellen Moore does, having called offense across the league for a long time in different spots? And they would be, presumably behind the 8 ball because of the timelines. If they were to be eliminated, there are a lot of hirings that have already happened. You would basically be trying to find probably the best quarterbacks coach that you could poach off of another staff, which makes it tough. So I think that there are ways in which this could become a problem for this team if they did lose and then lost Kellen Moore in the offseason. I just think the offensive line is going to be fine. As long as Jeff Stoutland wants to coach, this is probably going to be a top 10 offense, no matter who is calling plays for him. And if you have Vic Fangio, you probably got a top 10 defense for as long as he feels like calling plays defensively. That to me, just all arrows outside of Jalen Hurts just point to the direction of this is a playoff team no matter what. And then the ceiling is dependent on what level of quarterback play they get. And it's not a guarantee that he won't show up in 2025 and be more willing to take chances downfield, depending on how they want to design the offense in years to come. I just think that it's safer to bet on them than thinking that Washington can address all the roster holes they still have and that Jaden Daniels is, as a young quarterback, still a ceiling lifting guy. We just saw that with CJ Stroud. You don't just get to be that in perpetuity, right? Like sometimes things come up, defenses adjust, start making things harder on you. And I think that for Philadelphia, they'll just have more answers.
Yeah, the reason I said it was close because I feel like the Commanders have a pretty easy path to improve around Jaden Daniels. Your other pass catchers, your offensive line, the defense wasn't very good. Like they can make moves but then some of the regression stuff that Ruiz said, that maybe that balances out a little bit. Eagles, best defense in the NFL this year. That is hard to replicate. You might not have Zach Bond. You might not have Darius Slay. You might not have Josh Sweat next year. So there's going to be some roster turnover on that side of the ball. Offensively, they're in pretty good shape. Honestly, it's what you said, Diante. Jeff Stoutland coaching the offensive line, Vic Fangio coaching the defense, and the most talented roster Howie Roseman has ever put together in his career. It's just like that should be a high floor team that unless things go horribly wrong, at least has a chance to be in the playoffs and make a run next season.
I know this would never happen, but if Kellen Moore did leave, I feel like the ideal offensive coordinator, again, this will never happen for various reasons, is Chip. It's Chip. It's 100% Chip.
That's the only reason why I didn't say a specific name, but that was 1,000% who I had.
1,000% Chip.
There's a little bridge that it goes to South Philly called the Platte Bridge near the NovaCare complex. I'm pretty sure Howie Roseman would have that closed off before he was even able to cross to get in for an interview there. But I knew where you were going with that for sure. All right, let's move on to the AFC. In a potential classic. Again, Bills at the Chiefs. Chiefs are 1.5 point favorites at home. Will this be the year Josh Allen breaks through and they beat the Chiefs in the postseason and get to the Super Bowl? Or will we be here on Sunday night going, It's happened again. There's Patrick Mahomes at his like 9th Super Bowl media day, whatever it is. I don't even know what the number is, media day. And they come out of the AFC one more time. So first question, which quarterback would you rather have in this game? All right, let's be specific. This game, which quarterback would you rather have? Ruiz, I feel like I got to start with you on this one. What do you got?
This is like an impossible question to answer. Like you can't go wrong either way, and you can go wrong either way. Like no matter what you say, you're going to be wrong. I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes just because he's Patrick Mahomes. Everything else is telling me Josh Allen. He's been the better player this year. I think he's in the better situation in an offense that's not going to ask him to do too much. I think Patrick Mahomes has more playmaking pressure on him. I think if there's any chance that one of these guys throws an interception and like has a bad game, quote unquote, it's Patrick Mahomes. I would almost want to see these guys kind of switch sides. Like I think the Chiefs in this matchup could use a quarterback like Josh Allen. And I think the Bills, they've had like Josh Allen has performed like a very mature quarterback this postseason. He fought the urge to pitch that ball on the quarterback sneak.
That was hilarious exchange for anyone who didn't see it.
Yeah. When he was asked about it, he wanted to pitch the ball so badly.
Yes, 100%.
You
could tell it by his face.
Yeah, it's like a 7th grader, like who got caught like saying something in class behind the teacher's back or something. But I'm going to go with Patrick Mahomes because it's the playoffs. He's in the Arrowhead and he's Patrick Mahomes. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm sorry, Bills fan. I think your quarterback has been better. I think he has the better argument for MVP. I think he's going to have a better game in this one. But I'm not picking against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs.
Diante, what do you got? Our friend Dan Comer just put in the chat, someone have some courage here and choose Josh Allen. Is it going to be you, Diante? Or are you going with Patrick Mahomes as well?
Listen, I have been the bozo that has been picking against Kansas City at every other point in the season. So Dan Comer's little reverse psychology trick.
Come on the pod and say it yourself, Dan.
Yeah, he can do that on his own time. For me, the answer is if the aliens were coming, if they weren't, if my freedom or anybody else's freedom was on the line, if the Super Bowl is on the line, I don't care what the situation is. I only get one quarterback. The answer is Patrick Mahomes. It takes nothing away from Josh Allen, who obviously was playing like an MVP this season. I have seen this man make losing a Super Bowl and having passes bounce off of guys' chests and helmets look like the most amazing display of football I've ever seen in my life. In that Super Bowl that they lost to the Buccaneers, I've seen him do it all in the worst of situations. That's who I'm rolling with. Sorry, Josh Allen, and sorry, Bills fans. I think that I'll maybe make it up for you guys a little bit later on in this conversation.
If the aliens are coming, if he wasn't a ringer writer before this, he is now.
The moment he became a ringer writer right there. It's just the way sports work. When you are the GOAT or the king or the defending champ, you have to be dethroned. That is the way professional sports work. And that's what Mahomes is right now. Allen has been terrific. I actually think there's a case. The case for Allen would be what he does in the run game. You know, like he can just give you a different element that Patrick Mahomes isn't giving you with the designed runs, with the option runs, those kinds of things that are hard to defend. But in a big spot, you can't overthink it. And I think we've all been big Josh Allen fans and advocates and defenders throughout the course of this podcast. So it's just the way sports works. If he beats Mahomes, we can have this conversation next year, but he's got to beat him in the playoffs for me to agree to do that.
One of like my first like sports memories, like I don't remember the game at all, but I just remember this moment vividly, was like the 1998 Pacers Bulls series when Reggie Miller hits that like buzzer beater shot, and there's like point whatever seconds left on the clock, and Jordan gets a shot. And the ball like goes halfway down and then rims in and out and goes and like, but I remember as a kid watching that, like I just remember like kind of hating Jordan because they were winning all the time and I wanted the underdogs to win and being like, holy crap, this guy, like this wasn't a shot that anybody would make and he almost made it. And then I was like, this guy's going to do this every time. Like I root against him. And that's what Mahomes feels like. It defies logic. He shouldn't win this game. He shouldn't be the better quarterback in this one, but you're foolish if you pick against him.
Well, we will see which of us are foolish when we get to the picks. All right, quarterbacks aside, we know the quarterbacks are awesome. Which unit matters the most in this game? This one was difficult. I was going in a bunch of different directions. Diante, what do you have? Which unit matters the most in this game?
This one can go in a bunch of different directions as well. I'm going to take the hipster pick on the assumption that you or Steven will talk about the other one that I had in mind. I'm going with Buffalo's linebackers. I think that if this is going to be a good matchup for Buffalo's defense against Kansas City's offense, now having their linebackers healthy, in a rhythm, I thought that they played pretty well last week against Baltimore, even though the Ravens were able to run the ball at a heavier personnel, especially coming out of halftime. I think that taking away the RPO game, taking away the spread run game, taking away Patrick Mahomes' ability to extend and then find a passing window late in the down is going to come down to whether or not these linebackers can take away those throwing windows. We saw last week with Houston, who played well in so many different facets against the Chiefs offense. And those gotta have it situations where Patrick Mahomes does break the contain of the rush or gets away or tries to find a different arm angle. Azeez Al-Shaair, who is a good tackler, a good downhill player, was losing receivers behind him pretty often. Obviously, it cost him a big one in the Travis Kelce run with all the yards after the catch. They were trying to run a fire zone. He just gets right behind Azeez Al-Shaair and gets a bunch of yardage after he makes a DB miss. And then on the touchdown to Kelce, I believe, in the red zone, when Patrick Mahomes is extending and almost falling down, you see him kind of just release the route and start looking at the QB. I think that Matt Milano is not that kind of player. That's the way in which you can kind of find those kind of small margins that make a difference on passing downs. And I think if you look at what worked for them when they played each other earlier in the year, using spies, trying to flush Patrick Mahomes, trying to get him off his original landmark, a lot of that was based on them trusting like Terrell Bernard and the rest of their linebackers to be able to corral him once he broke contain. I think that there's going to be a lot of that in this game as well. Tight coverage, which means that your linebackers, if Patrick Mahomes tucks and runs, have to be available to make tackles out on the perimeter.
All right. I stay on that side of the ball, and I chose the Bills defensive line. So it kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying there, Diante. I'm looking at this game, and I just feel like I know what it's going to be. It's going to be back and forth, long methodical drives, 7 plays, 9 plays, 11 plays. There's going to be like, oh, the Chiefs have possessed the ball for 7 minutes in this quarter type deal. And the Chiefs run game, the last 2 times they faced the Bills, week 11, they had a 92nd percentile game in terms of rushing success rate. And in the divisional round last year, a 95th percentile game in terms of rushing success rate. So I don't think any of us would look at the Chiefs run game this year and be like, oh, it's been phenomenal. But in a game like this, I wonder if it shows up a little bit. We talked about the Bills run defense going into last week a lot against the Baltimore Ravens and Derrick Henry. And I just wonder in this game, do the Chiefs have a little more rushing success than we're expecting? And then obviously going hand in hand with what Diante just mentioned, can you pressure Mahomes? All right, very boring, take from me, but when you're facing a great quarterback, but it still does matter. And I really don't know what to make of this Bills pass rush. There's times I watch them this year where I go, okay, these guys are showing up in a big way. And then I look at some of the numbers and go, man, they've kind of underachieved this year. So I don't know what to make of it. Obviously, the Chiefs tackle situation has been an issue all season long. I'm not stupid. I know Patrick Mahomes can still perform if he gets pressured this year, but it's still, you add it all together. You look at some of the numbers for him under pressure. He doesn't have the same pass catchers this year that he's had before. And it's not going to take, 4 stops in this game. It might take 2 stops in this game, or it might take a red zone stop. So in those situations, can the Bills defensive line be good enough? So that's what I went with, the unit that matters the most in this game. Ruiz, where are you at with this?
I'm going to stick with the same theme, but go on the other side of the ball. I think it's the Chiefs front. Whether it's stopping the run on early downs or rushing the passer and finishing off the rushes on third down, I think that's the most important thing. I think Kansas City kind of slowing down Buffalo is more important than Buffalo slowing down Kansas City in this game, because Buffalo has the potential to put up 45 points, as we've seen. But I think this is a game, this is like an old cliche, like you have to earn the right to run the passer, rush the passer. You hear players say this all the time. You hear coaches say it all the time. But I feel like that's like my major takeaway from this season. Is like that, how much of a difference that makes. Getting guys into pass rushing situations where you can pin your ears back on the defensive side and rush the passer. I thought that's what Kansas City wasn't able to do in the first game. Buffalo was able to run the football on third down. I think they ran it 5 times, and they had a 100% success rate on third down running the football, whether that was Josh Allen using his legs or the running backs. And if Kansas City is getting them into third down and it's 3rd and 5, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, you kind of lose the advantage of Spags in that situation. Because you're not going to get into your like designer coverages and exotic blitzes and all that. You're going to play basically base defense against those looks just because of the pressure that Allen puts on you as a runner and that offensive line puts on you as a defense. So whoever wins on first down, whoever is able to rush and get into rush situations against the other quarterback, I think is going to win this game. But I think it's paramount for Kansas City. If they don't, and Buffalo can run. It doesn't have to be a monster rushing day for Buffalo. They can run for like 4 yards a pop on first down. I think it's going to be hard for the Chiefs to keep up with the Bills.
And honestly, that's why my pick is James Cook going over 55.5 rushing yards in this game. And I don't think it's going to be many explosive runs, right? I think this is probably going to be one of those ugly averages where he runs the ball 16 times for, 64 yards or whatever the case may be. But they're a valuable yardage on every carry because they're able to control the down and distance situation. And I think that this is something we saw last week against the Ravens. This is something that the Bills have really been doing all season long because they have invested so much in this offensive line and their run game design. They've developed some unstoppable answers where they can just pull levers in the run game based on how you're trying to defend them. If you want to pack the line of scrimmage or put more guys up near the line of scrimmage, they'll get into those trip sets, those nub sets, and just run a bunch of bubble RPOs, and go zone and gap run scheme and really put those linebackers in conflict. If they feel like you can't win in between the tackle box, they'll get under center and put a 6 offensive lineman on the field, and they're just going to run weak side zone at you over and over and over again. Steven and I talked about this when the Bills were playing the Lions towards the end of the season. They have so many different ways that they can kind of get into, the runs that they like against looks that they like. And this is not even mentioning what Josh Allen can be as a scrambler and designed runner, right? They always have that break glass in case of emergency part of their game as well. And I think that that's going to play a factor. They've been able to kind of keep that at bay outside of the situations where they absolutely need it. Even in the Denver game, he ran a little bit, but they were really able to control the line of scrimmage. In the Baltimore game, they were able to really mash Baltimore's front on early downs with under center runs and straight downhill runs. This is the game where you can kind of let Josh Allen loose as a runner and say, hey, if the numbers aren't right, if the look's not right, you can always go on your own. If we call a quick pass and you don't find Khalil Shakir or Dawson Knox or Dalton Kincaid immediately, just tuck and run yourself and reequate these numbers for us, because that's another way that you can get into the back of Steve Spagnuolo's head and make him think, do I really want to send the corner blitz right now? Do I really want to get into the exotic look? If I know that this guy is effective at getting the ball out of his hands quickly, and if we don't get immediate pressure on this guy, he's going to be able to shake off whatever pass rusher we have outside of Chris Jones and be able to go extend plays or scramble. I think that the run game and the use of the threat of Josh Allen's legs, both in the drop back game and in the design run game, should be enough to, I think, break this thing open. And I think that they should be able to control the line of scrimmage if they play as well in this game as they did against Denver and against Baltimore in the postseason.
I think the threat of Josh Allen running is going to matter, but I think the Chiefs are going to try their best to kind of take that away, which is why I like the James Cook pick, but that kind of is related to my pick. I'm going to go under 47.5 rushing yards for Allen. Just because of the reason Diante laid out. I think it's going to be a game where he's beating that pressure with quick throws. And I think that's going to be by design. I think if Kansas City, you can't stop everything. You have to give up something. And I think the one thing you want to give up probably in this game is quick throws, make the wide receivers beat you after the catch. Don't allow Josh Allen to beat you with his legs or throwing the ball downfield. And don't let this running game, like the design under center running game, beat you, because it's been a huge part of Buffalo's game. And I think that's what we're going to see out of them this game. I don't think we're going to see them leverage Allen as a runner, with the ball actually in his hand. I think they're just going to leverage the threat of it and kind of work off that. Where even if Allen doesn't run for 50 yards in this game, he's still going to have value as a runner. And that's always what you have with these types of quarterbacks who make you do so many different other things.
No doubt about it. All right, let's take a break. We come back, answer a couple more questions, get our picks on Chiefs Bills, and then we'll touch on some of the coaching news around the NFL. All right, we are back on the Ringer NFL show. Question number 3, whose legacy from this game is most at stake? Steven Ruiz, what do you got?
I feel like the easy answer is Allen, just because he's the guy that has to get over the hump.
I take the low-hanging fruit,
But honestly, I don't think it's Allen, because I think all of us agree he's going to get one eventually. If he doesn't get a ring, he's going to get to the Super Bowl. He's going to get one. The person involved that I think we have more questions about his ability to eventually get one is Sean McDermott. And I think he has to prove that he deserves to be along for the ride, the Josh Allen ride, for the rest of his career, which isn't a given. And there's some stats out there where after 5 years, if the same coach and same quarterback are together for 5 years, they have it's never happened. They didn't win a Super Bowl in the first 5 years. They've never won one after that. So
This is
They've
Andy
passed
Reid
by
and Donovan
years.
McNabb. This is
Yeah.
like, the guy McDermott worked for early in his career.
Are you like Ron Rivera and Cam Newton, another staff that Sean McDermott was a part of? There are a lot of these instances where these guys are together forever and it just never happened. So, like, I think if they lose this one,
Wait, what about Lamar? I was sorry. That's a great stat. Lamar Jackson and John Harbaugh. Wow. So
that's a discussion for the offseason.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a great offseason discussion.
I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know that stat. Though. All right, sorry.
Yeah,
Continue. I just kept thinking of guys.
Stat. I forget who came up with it, but it's still true after all these years. And I don't know, man. Allen's not going anywhere. His legacy's not. I mean, sure, he's going to get ripped on like the talk shows on Monday, but like, what are they going to do? Cut him? Trade him? Like in August, we're going to forget all about him and be talking about him. And it'd be asking the same questions we're asking right now.
I just went with the low hanger. You are right. I mean, obviously, we all like it does matter if he goes in and he plays poorly. I mean, that does matter in a big spot against Patrick Mahomes. If he plays, relatively well, it'll be the same week we just had with Lamar Jackson. Everyone can just repeat their takes next week with Josh Allen, pretty much there. But I still think it's a big spot. I mean, this is not it sounds so stupid to say. I'm about to say it, and I'm like, Sheil, that sounds so. I'm like, it's not a great Chiefs team. It's not the best. It's not the best version of the Chiefs we've seen.
No, it's not.
With Patrick Mahomes, and that doesn't mean they're not going to win the Super Bowl. We all know right now they've got a great chance to win it. But I do think if you're a Bills fan, like, you're looking at this version. It's not like Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce in their prime. It's not like an elite defense. It's like solid. Oh, Patrick Mahomes. Like that. That's kind of what the team is. And so if you're a Bills fan, you're looking at this going, we have a chance. Josh Allen's healthy. Our offensive line is very good. Like this is our chance. We're 1.5 point favorites on the road. And so Josh Allen's trying to dethrone the king. Like I said, that's a big deal. He has not been able to beat Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. I know it's not just Josh Allen. Trust me, we talk about that all the time. But still, I do think it matters. It would matter in a big way for him whether he is able to do it and get to the Super Bowl. Obviously, if he wins the Super Bowl, that is a huge deal. But even just getting past Mahomes and getting to the Super Bowl would be a big deal versus just when you go to these, like they have these locker room clean out days when you're like on a beat. And sometimes you just see these guys at the end of it when they've had a good season, but they fall short. And like, they're just like, you don't understand. Like now they're thinking about like the OTAs they have to go through and training camp and a week 4 game where they're 12-point favorites. And like, that's life when you're a really good team, but you have to do all this and avoid the injury stuff and all the other nonsense just to get to this point. So he's here. He's 1 game away. He's 4 quarters away from getting there. And so that's why I think I put Josh Allen there.
Yeah, it's like you're like deep into a video game and like for some reason the game breaks or whatever and you have to start over and you have to do like all the levels you've already done again. You're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
I shouldn't say exactly. Yeah, it's probably a little more than that. But for
it's exactly, you're right. Playing a video game is exactly like playing quarterback in the NFL.
All right, Diante, who do you have legacy most at stake?
I mean, the words that stick out to me is at stake, right? And that's why it's Josh Allen, right? I think when it's time to talk Super Bowl, then I think I like what Steven's saying about Sean McDermott, right? If they were able to get over this hump and then we were having this same conversation ahead of the Super Bowl and the Bills were involved, I think that's an interesting conversation to have. I just think that you laid it out, Sheil. I just think about last year's AFC title game, right? Where it just felt like, oh man, Baltimore, they brought in a defensive coordinator who knew how to construct the defense to stop a Chiefs offense. They brought in an offensive coordinator who can update the passing game and make it efficient enough to where if they've got to have this back and forth slugfest with the Patrick Mahomes, you've got enough answers in that way to do so. And then they don't get over the hump. And now you're just left with all the conversations that you thought you might be able to put to bed before or going into that game. The same thing exists with the Bills, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They have been building this. They've been getting closer and closer. Obviously, last year, it probably felt as close as you could possibly get to without beating this team. Yeah. You're at home. You had the advantage for most of the game, and you end up not getting over the hump. And they were able to double down on that offensive identity. And it's a better version of what it already was, right? So much positive momentum, I think, has come out of this season. They have built themselves to be able to beat this specific kind of flawed version of the Chiefs where you might be able to run on them a little bit, where you can use quick passes to bother all the blitzes that Spags is throwing at you, where you should have just enough pass rush to be able to at least get Mahomes off his spot. I don't expect you to, have the kind of game that they did when they beat them in the regular season, where they were getting, more sacks than you're accustomed to seeing Patrick Mahomes take on these money downs, but they can bother him. They can get in his way. They can slow him up just enough to where you can get a shot. I think Steven said it perfectly coming out of the recap show, right? Where it's like, the best I can say is that somebody maybe has a chance to beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. This is as good a maybe as there could possibly be in a game against Patrick Mahomes. They have a shot to go into the fourth quarter with the lead in the AFC Championship game on the road, and that's as good a shot as you're going to have against Mahomes. And for that reason, if they're able to get off the hump, the guy who has the most to benefit from is Josh Allen, because now not only is it a confirmation of everything they've been building towards, now Joe Burrow's not the only other guy in this generation of quarterbacks in the AFC who can say that they went on the road and did it against this guy. That I think will have a lot to do in the conversations we're having about the hierarchy of quarterbacks. And if he doesn't, we are still left with Mahomes in the field.
This world. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that from an NFL, in terms of like just the drama of this, we talked about it in the divisional round, no matter what happened, this is the way we were going to be talking about this game. And this is a golden opportunity, I think, to change the way that we talk about the AFC and the NFL at large if they're able to get over the hump.
The numbers from that division, when I was doing research for this game in this pod, the Bills' offensive performance in that divisional round game last year, take every game played in the NFL the last 2 years, that was a 99th percentile game based on offensive success rate and a 95th percentile game based on EPA per drive. And they lost the game. The Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. It's crazy.
At home too.
It's literally almost impossible to be as efficient as they were offensively, and they still weren't able to win there, which brings us to question number 4. Who's winning this game? Diante, I'm going to start with you because I think you foreshadowed it earlier. Let's see, but maybe you've changed your mind. I've been flip-flopping. Who do you have winning this football game?
This is my third pick. I'm taking the Bills to cover the 1.5 spread.
Wow, and he's making it one of his picks.
So, like, for all intents and purposes, you're basically picking the Bills to win. You're basically picking the Bills to win straight up if it's a 1.5 point spread, right? So, but I do think, and we talked about this coming out of the game, this is something I've been talking about all season long. I thought that both Baltimore and Buffalo have built an identity that is good enough to be able to beat Kansas City. This is not even borrowing, exclusively from what the game was in the regular season this year. I just look at the fact that their best games in terms of rushing success rate, their effectiveness in the run game happened in the postseason against 2 good run defenses. Now, in Denver's case, they play with a lot of light bodies, right? It's a lot of boomer bust defense for them, and they were able to dominate them, and that's how that offensive line is built. But against Baltimore, who has a Michael Pierce, a Nnamdi Madubuike, a Roquan Smith at the second level, they were still able to do whatever they wanted in between the tackles, which means that, like, to me, there's no more confidence you could possibly have going up against a team that is going to match you, pound for pound, body for body in the box. And you should be able to feel like you should still be able to move guys. And then on the other side of the ball, I was really encouraged with how their defensive interior sold out to stop the run against Baltimore, shooting gaps. I think that with the movement they've had along the offensive line, putting Tooney at tackle, you look at how Caliendo played. I thought that outside of Creed Humphrey working in tandem with Trey Smith, I thought the interior offensive line kind of struggled in the run game last week at times. I think that this is a golden opportunity for Buffalo's defense to once again stamp the fact that for whatever issues they have on the back end, and they do exist, when they want to load up the box and take away the run game, they can do so. And if they're able to control the line of scrimmage that way, that's the winning edge to me. And that's what I expect to happen when they play each other. It's going to be a tight game because Patrick Mahomes is never going to lose in a blowout in the playoffs outside of that loss to the Bucs in the Super Bowl. I think that this goes down to the end, but Buffalo has just enough game control to be able to get this one over the line.
Ruiz, who do you got?
I don't even know.
Do you want me to go? I can go first if you want.
I'll go.
No, okay.
I said I wouldn't pick against Patrick Mahomes when I was picking the quarterbacks, but I don't have to pick against Patrick Mahomes for the Bills to win this game. This is a team sport. It's 53 on 53. And any way you look at it, Buffalo has the better team. Buffalo's the better team. No. They can run the football.
What are we doing?
They can pass the football. And I think this Buffalo team is an indictment of this idea that you should try to maximize efficiency on offense. This, like we've been saying, and I think we all agree with this and we all feel this way, and I think Buffalo fans all feel this way. This is a better offense than it was last year and it was the year before. But when you look at the stats, it's a worse offense than it was last year by EPA, by success rate, by pass success rate, all that stuff. But they've taken the load off of Josh Allen, and they still have been able to maintain those results and beat teams like Baltimore, beat teams like Denver who have a good defense, beat teams throughout the year without asking Josh Allen to be the superhero all the time. I think it was for games like this, because you can't ask your quarterback to be a superhero against Steve Spagnuolo. They've built the perfect team. They're a better team than Kansas City. They should win this game. And I just changed my mind in the middle of my rant. I'm still picking Kansas City. I don't care.
Okay. All right. Thank God, because I am picking the Bills. I picked the Bills when we did our little playoff exercise. So I was like, I can't go against them here. But if we were all going Chiefs, we would have had to bring in producer Christopher Sutton. We would have had to bring in Dan. We would have had to have somebody with a voice come on and say, no, it's the Chiefs. You guys laid it out. Listen, it doesn't feel right. I will not be surprised, obviously, if the Chiefs win. I like what the Bills can do offensively. You guys mentioned it. And then Chiefs still finished the season 30th in explosive play rate. So it might not matter. Maybe they'll throw for 6 completions at 20 plus yards, but I do think that's a hard way to play. And so maybe if it's the possessions are shrunken and each team gets it 7 times or 8 times, maybe there's a turnover. You know what it's going to be? It's going to be a fluky turnover. It's going to be a fumble by someone other than Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. It's going to be special teams, potentially a missed kick or a muffed punt, something like that. Though that's how this game's going to be decided with all the analysis. But there you go.
Let me actually make an argument for the Chiefs winning this game, because I feel like
that's easy.
We've kind of figured, beyond they're at home and they have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. But I do think we've seen this Bills run game really run over teams, as Diante has mentioned. But I think the Chiefs are able to play kind of that throwback style of run defense where they're going to punch you in the mouth. They're not going to let you kind of just run down the field at the expense of pass defense. I don't think they can do the pass first thing. We're going to take away explosives, but they can also do the caveman. We're going to load up the box and run blitz you and punch you in the mouth and not let you run. And that's the one formula, I think, to beating this Bills offense and slowing it down is taking away the run. They're 40% pass rate on first down this year. They don't put the ball in Josh Allen's hands as much as they did. And they go under center. So they're not even using him in the zone read game and leveraging him as a runner. So you can beat this team, the other 10 players on first down. I think Spags can put together a plan to beat this team and those other 10 players on first down, and then make Josh Allen be that superhero on second and third down. And then it only takes 1 or 2 coverage disguises to trick him, and he throws you a pick or 2. And I think that's enough for Patrick Mahomes to close it out on the road. Do I think that's going to happen in my heart? Not really, but I could see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, Mahomes, their offense has played well against this Bills defense for the most part over the last 2 seasons here. So they can control the game. And then can they just get that one turnover, that one high variance play on defense? They obviously can win this game. All right, last question here. Which team is most likely to get back to the game next year? I'll start with this one. I've got the Chiefs. They're here literally every year. So that's an easy one. But I was always also looking at this. We just talked a lot about the Bills offense, and we have all year. I don't think we've talked enough about how much turnover luck has and you can say it's not luck. It's they're playing a certain way, but the turnover numbers with them are kind of bananas. They have only turned over the ball on 4.2% of their possessions. That's the lowest rate for any offense in the last 25 years. So you can say they're doing a great job at it, and you're probably right. The turnover luck's going in their way in a big, big way. If you just look at it as a team overall, so now offense and defense, highest turnover EPA for any team in the last 10 years. In the last 25 years, only the 2000 Ravens and the 2010 Patriots have benefited more from turnovers than this year's Bills team. So a lot of what's gone their way has been the turnovers going their way on both offense and defense. Now, I think the Bills have a great shot to get, as long as Josh Allen's healthy, they're in the same boat. They've got a great chance to get here every single season. But that was one thing that kind of stood out to me as I was doing a little bit of a deeper dive on the Bills. So I've got the Chiefs, but they both obviously have a great shot. Ruiz, what do you got?
It's got to be the Chiefs. They've gone 7 times in a row.
I know,
they
it's
need
crazy.
one more for the record. I feel like this is the easier question to answer. And then like Buffalo, there's the chance that Joe Brady leaves. The Chiefs aren't losing Andy Reid, probably not losing Spags at this point in his career. Like there's a chance for turnover there where we're probably going to just run it back in Kansas City. And maybe that will cause concerns about, all the holes we've talked about throughout the season. But, they're still going to probably make the divisional round at the very least. And you just win one more game and you're there.
Yeah. Diante, agreed?
I mean, come on, man. Of course.
All right. Okay, let's move on. All right. There we go.
This is an easy conversation.
All right. My last pick is Mahomes over 4.5 rushing attempts. A couple scrambles here. Maybe you get a kneel down at the end of the half, and if they win the game,
you're going for kneel downs.
Well, listen, I learned this from the Ringers Joe House last week, where he's like, don't take the rushing yards with Mahomes. Take the attempts. Why? He's like, because the kneel downs, you could lose yardage. Did you see Mahomes' kneel downs last week? He lost 9 yards. It was I've never seen a guy go further back. So I was
it's like the opposite of Jalen Hurts that one time when he was like,
right.
Not trying to lose yards.
He was doing the opposite. So I'm going to take the rushing attempts, scrambles, kneel downs, add it all up, get me over
the number,
4.5.
Sheil. That's what gave you.
So there you go. So my 3, we can review our picks real quick. I've got Mahomes over 4.5 rush attempts. I've got Terry McLaurin over 64.5 receiving yards, and I've got Saquon Barkley longest rush over 23.5 yards. Diante, what were your 3 picks?
So my 3 is AJ Brown getting an anytime touchdown, James Cook going over 55.5 rush yards, and I'm taking the Bills as a 1.5 point underdog.
The boldness of that, amazing. You should get 2 points if that hits.
Taking a shot, man.
I do feel like he's missing an opportunity. You should go just take the money line so you get the plus odds and you get the whatever the rule is we have.
But there's because there's no slap game of the week anymore. So there's no benefit of that.
Damn.
All right, Ruiz, what do you got?
I don't know ball. I'm going to go under 47.5 rushing yards for Josh Allen. I'm going to go over 179.5 passing yards for Jalen Hurts, and then under in the Eagles-Commanders game, 47.5.
There you go. All right, those are the picks. We can do a little bit of a speed round on these, but let's at least get to the coaching news here one by one. We'll hit on 3 of the topics, and don't worry if we don't mention your team or your hire. We have plenty of time in the weeks and months ahead where we will do deep dives on all those moves. But the big one, Jets hire Aaron Glenn. So Aaron Glenn goes from Lions defensive coordinator to the New York Jets head coach. Diante, what did you make of this hire for the New York Jets?
I mean, to me, I think it was the smartest move to make. I know that Jets fans probably wanted to see more of maybe the hottest offensive minds be brought in. But I think that he would immediately be responsible for the best unit, right? The most talented unit that they have on the field being the defense. And I think if you make a quick turnaround there, you're instantly raising the floor. I think that Aaron Glenn could have been a head coach last season. I mean, you could probably make that argument for both. You can definitely make that argument for both Lions coordinators last season, is that they could have left with different head coaching jobs at that point in time. But no, I think that this would be fine. I do think that what's interesting about it is you bring in the defensive kind of CEO type. I think that they're probably signaling that they're going to take this offense in a much different direction. I can't imagine that Aaron Glenn walks in, sees Aaron Rodgers and says, for all my career being known as the guy that holds people accountable, I'm going to kowtow to the guy that's off the Achilles injury and just played some of his worst football this season. I think that the organization kind of cleans house. And maybe you have to deal with kind of like a year 0 thing where the offense just needs to flush and deal kind of with all the talent drain that they've had over the last 2 years, trying to get Aaron Rodgers and what it cost him in draft capital and trying to trade for Devontae Adams and all of that. But I think that's probably the right decision. And while I'm not willing to forecast any immediate success for them, I think that they ultimately landed on a good guy, even if the process was an absolute mess before they got here.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you saw what he did. That Lions defense still finished 5th in defensive DVOA despite all the injuries. got rated high in that NFLPA players poll as a defensive coordinator. So it's like, all right, his relationships, guys like playing for him. And it just, the biggest hire for a guy like that is going to be offensive coordinator. So I agree with everything you said there. I think the Jets defense has a chance to have a quick turnaround next year with some of the talent they have there. And then we'll see where it goes in the long term. But I think if you're a Jets fan, you look at all the options out there, I would be like, all right, this seems like a likable guy that you can root for and maybe can have some long-term staying power, although Ruiz, nothing is obviously guaranteed.
Yeah, but like his background, it's always hard with these head coaches until we see him do the head coaching job, because defensive coordinating really has nothing to do with what he's going to do unless he calls plays. And still, that doesn't really matter. But he played under Parcells, he coached under Sean Payton, he coached under Dan Campbell. I feel like the guy knows how to run a locker room and build a culture. Yeah. That's all you can really ask for. And he played for the franchise. He's one of the best players in franchise history, one of the best quarterbacks. Right. So that's an added bonus to it. And I have to say, I can guarantee you he took this interview process seriously, judging by his game plan against Washington.
Oh my gosh. Oh dear. Unbelievable. There you go. All right. We have some breaking-ish news on my timeline here, gentlemen. So we were going to talk about the Jaguars parting ways with Trent Baalke, which was He's LOL. Back. Who could have seen this coming? Obviously, everybody's like, what? Everybody was on the same page. Why are you keeping Trent Baalke? You're not going to get all the head coaching candidates you want. Why would they want to work with the guy who's a survivor in the NFL? Well, Liam Cohen has now reconsidered. So previously, the Bucs offensive coordinator had turned down that job. It was said he was going to be returning to the Tampa Bay Bucs as their offensive coordinator. Since then, the Jaguars part ways with Trent Baalke, and now all over my timeline here. This is from Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times. Cohen had not spoken to the Bucs since yesterday afternoon. They tried to reach him and have been unable to. Instead of signing his contract, which was a formality, he secretly traveled to Jacksonville to meet with Jags owner Shad Khan. Now, Adam Schefter says Cohen said he reached out to Bucs head coach Todd Bowles to inform him of his interest in interviewing for the Jaguars head coaching job. That reads to me like a little damage control. Diante, he ghosted the Bucs and now could potentially be headed to the Jacksonville Jaguars. What a story.
What a story. I mean, and I feel like this very much sounds to me like the stories I've heard from friends of mine where the girl they were interested in was ready to walk out the door if they didn't make a change. And now all of a sudden I'm in the gym, I'm working out, I'm getting my hair cut regularly, I'm getting my finances back in order. Anything, baby, please stay around. This is definitely what I'm hearing. Leave your ex alone. All right. That's dead weight. Sometimes you just got to cut a little dead weight to move ahead in life. And that's exactly what it sounds like is happening in Jacksonville.
Yeah. Even if Cohen doesn't come to Jacksonville, they will be better for it because it at least led to Baalke's dismissal. And that was one of the most confusing things about this coaching hiring cycle is Shad Khan's loyalty to Baalke just makes no sense whatsoever. This guy has gotten this type of loyalty from the two owners that he's worked for so far, Jed York in San Francisco and now Khan in Jacksonville. But it was obvious that this wasn't working out and that this was a deterrent for possible coaching hires. And some of the brightest candidates in the league turned them down because of it. And now we can definitely say it. We had to speculate before, but Cohen just told us that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys follow NBA free agency news. This was maybe a decade or so ago, but LaMarcus Aldridge took a meeting with the Lakers when he was a free agent and he came out of it. And basically the reporting around it was that he left there are you guys serious? Is this a serious organization? Yeah. Do you think that I, as an all NBA level player, would come play for this organization just based on what you presented me? Nothing here is up to the level of getting a player like me. And they followed that up by making sure they cleaned up their operation. And you get a LeBron James after. That's not to say Liam Cohen is their LeBron James, but it does speak to clearly he signaled with no uncertainty that you are not a serious organization in the way that head coach candidates talk about you for as long as your GM is hanging around. And I have to give Shad Khan at least a sliver of credit that once it was made clear that that's why you're not getting the interviews that you are seeking, that he made the move to make sure that they weren't at the absolute ass end of this head coach hiring cycle.
God, this is so funny. My entire timeline, the Bucs were not shy about telling people that they were trying to get in touch with Liam Cohen to find out what was going on, and he was not responding to calls to tell you. I mean, I feel like you could just tell them. I don't know. Whatever.
Kind of embarrassing on the Bucs side to kind of leak that information. They were getting ghosted by Liam Cohen.
Yeah. They're not shy. I mean, I feel like if I just emailed something at bucks.com right now, somebody might tell me the same thing. It seems like they're not shy about putting that out there. So we'll see if Liam Cohen becomes the next head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Last one here. Bears hire Ben Johnson. I love the video. Anytime there's a video of the new coach walking in the building and just having to address like every single I watch it every time. Some of the best content out there that there is. Ruiz, what do you make of this pairing? Ben Johnson with Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears.
I mean, I think this is the best sign for Caleb Williams because Ben Johnson, by all accounts, is a very picky guy when choosing his head coaching opportunity. We heard him turn down like Washington last year. He obviously went back to Detroit. He said the reason why he went back to Detroit during his press conference was to kind of learn how to manage the other parts of the game. I don't know if Dan Campbell gave him more responsibilities on game day, but he seems like a guy who thinks these things out. And I don't think he would have jumped into a situation with Caleb Williams if he didn't believe that Caleb Williams was a quarterback that could take him where he wants to go as a coach. So I don't know what the offense is going to look like. I'm assuming there's going to be drastic changes. Ben Johnson said that at the press conference yesterday. He said it's not going to be a replica of the Detroit playbook. We have different personnel. So I can't really speculate what the offense is going to look like, but I do think it's a positive sign for Caleb Williams that the best coaching hire wanted to work with him.
Agree, Diante? You like the fit?
1000%. Stephen laid out exactly what I was going to mention, right? All the reporting around the courting of Ben Johnson over the last 2 seasons has been centered on how meticulously he has tried to prepare for this opportunity, how picky he's been, how mindful every phase of being a head coach kind of seems to be at the front of his mind. And I think that if he chooses Chicago and if he should choose Caleb Williams, and that to me means that he believes, even if he's not able to replicate what Detroit did offensively, and obviously you can't do that because they have big issues on the offensive line, and you've got a quarterback that does not work in structure the exact same way that Jared Goff did. To me, that says that A, he has thought long and hard about the fact that he does not have to have what he had in Detroit to be successful, and that's what he thinks, and that Caleb Williams is going to be amenable to whatever changes, or he's amenable to whatever changes are going to be necessary to maximize Caleb Williams. And if they are able to land on Dennis Allen as a DC, I don't know if there was confirmation on that. I hadn't checked or not, but if that's the case, to me, again, that checks the box of a guy who has only been an offensive play caller in the NFL and over a short period of time understands it's not my job to have my hands on every piece of this process. I'm going to let Dennis Allen be the head coach of my defense. I'm going to focus on developing my quarterback. And I will say, I think that they have some weird dynamics in Chicago's front office between Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles. There are a lot of cooks in the kitchen there. I do think that this allows him to say, I know what I'm good at. Even as a head coach, I'm just going to focus and lean in on what I'm good at and allow everything else around me to be handled by the people who are more qualified to have a say so than I do. And if Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren are able to come to some sort of consensus on how to build this roster around Ben Johnson, there's an opportunity that we could look up in a couple of years and see a team that is finally competent and on the verge of contending, if not even faster, depending on what they're able to do with this offense.
Yeah, that's the big thing for me. I like the swing for upside. Like you guys said, we don't know. Could be a disaster. We could be here in week 6 next year going, oh my gosh, Ben Johnson, great coordinator, but this isn't for him. That happens a lot in the NFL. It's hard to predict. But the upside is that this guy's a special offensive coach. We just saw him, produce a top 5 offense for 3 straight seasons without having an elite quarterback in Detroit. Now, he had a lot of other great pieces there that he doesn't have in Chicago, but I think that upside is there. The film, the creativity, all that passes the eye test. So if it hits, you got Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams for the next stretch here. Like that, there is an excitement there. Might not work out. Could be a disaster. There's an excitement there. But yeah, Ben Johnson with Dennis Allen, that pairing, I think, is just about as good as you could hope for if you're a Chicago Bears fan. So we'll see what it looks like. We'll talk about all these teams again in the weeks and months ahead. That is what the offseason is for. But we wanted to touch on the newsiest topics of this week while we could. All right. There we go. Thank you to Diante Lee, Thank you to Stephen Ruiz. Thank you to producer Christopher Sutton. Additional production supervision by Conor Nevins, Arjuna Ramgopal, and Dan Comer. We will be back. Well, one more time this week, Sunday night, recapping both of the championship games. So that will be in your feed, and you can watch it on FanDuel TV as well if you want. All right, everyone, have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Sunday night on the Ringer NFL Show.